Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this evening I'm delighted to be joined by Kevin McCluskey for the Champions League preview. Kevin, all week we have been discussing the what ifs and who's going to play, who's not, what the shape is going to be. Brendan Rodgers has announced his starting 11. I'm going to run through it very briefly for anyone who's in the comments section who hasn't seen the starting lineup. It's Joe Hart, Alistair Johnston, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Liam Scales and Greg Taylor. It's a back four. Your middle three is made up of Captain Callum McGregor, Matt O'Reilly and Paulo Bernardo. And up top, James Forrest is in for the suspended Louis Palma with Yang on the right, Kogo through the middle. And on the bench, we have Bain, Morrison, Lagerbielk, Phillips, Turnbull, Holm, O, Ralston, Welsh, Frame, and Mikey Johnston. Kevin McCluskey, what do you make of all that?
Aye, I think that is, for being honest, Bernardo aside, it's probably the strongest team that we would put out, or that most people would have selected. And the only reason I say him aside is because he hasn't featured that much recently in the domestic games, and I don't think I would probably have went with Home over him. I thought he was a wee bit off at the weekend, but I want to see him get a run of matches. But otherwise, I think in fairness, that's the strongest 11 that we could go with. And I know that we'd spoken at the weekend, and the lads spoke about it yesterday as well, about maybe changing shape. I don't think it's Rodgers' thing to do that. Not from the start. He seems to be a kind of 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 kind of a man. So I'm not surprised by the shape. And like I say, it's a strong team. It's the strongest we could put out. So you've got to hope that come the end of the game they get the result that we want as well.
Absolutely. Now, apologies in advance. I coughed and spluttered my way through the Axiom bulletin with Liam Carrigan earlier on, and as soon as it was about to finish up, I coughed my lungs out. So I'm not feeling all that peachy at the moment, Kevin. If I have a wee coughing fit, you can take over. Now, I would agree in that I think it's the strongest 4-3-3. Now, if you look back on the Wander Around Paradise on Monday morning, it hits the channel at 6 o'clock that night. My predicted lineup had Paulo Bernardo in there. And my thinking behind it, Kevin, was that Brendan, I was trying to second guess a gaffer basically. Brendan Rodgers seems to favour Paulo Bernardo in games like this. So that was my thinking behind it. It wasn't necessarily who I wanted in the side. And then this morning or this afternoon, rather, I'm talking to Liam Carrigan about my predicted lineup. And I've completely changed my mind. And I'm saying, right, I think we're going to be playing David Turnbull. But my reason and my thinking behind that was we were going to change formation. We were going to play 3-5-2. The midfield was going to be flooded. We didn't need that additional defensive cover of a Bernardo or a Home or even an Iwata, because Iwata's name was thrown into the mix. Iwata's not even on the bench tonight. So, yes, that's kind of thrown my theory into the trash can, Kevin, because I was kind of banking on this being a 3-5-2 tonight, simply because I felt that it was a safe approach. So hats off to Brendan Rodgers, because when I see that he's playing the favoured 4-3-3, I see it as more of an offensive approach to this game. I think he's actually going to go toe-to-toe. He's going to go all out to win it, with the caveat of there's still a 3-5-2 in the bank if you need it, because we've got the personnel on the bench.
Yeah, I think from a fan's point of view and from our point of view here, 3-5-2 makes a lot of sense for a game like today. If we don't want to lose the game, which obviously we don't, right? But you get three at the back, you can kind of flood the midfield a little bit, and you get two up front, which gives us the extra goal threat. And it's something we can turn to later on. But I think when you look at Rodgers throughout his career, he's fairly solid, and he likes to be a 4-3-3 kind of man. And that's probably a more offensive formation than 3-5-2, the way that he wants to play it, the way that we want to get boys forward from the midfield as well. And this is a game that not only can we not afford to lose, I think we can't afford to not win it if we want to have any chance of going through as a third place team. So you're quite right in that respect, I think, probably to go 4-3-3. It is bold, but that's his formation, that's the way he wants us to play. And he did it the last time when he was here as well. He was going quite attack minded out in Barcelona, and Paris Saint-Germain. We didn't obviously get the results, and we don't want a repeat of that. But he is fairly adventurous as a coach, and I think tonight will be no different. He'll want us to go out and try and impose ourselves and get a result, because there's no point sitting back to play for a draw in this game. We have to win it. So you've just got to go for it. I think just to go back on Bernardo, I think he was a surprise for me in the sense that I would have went with home. But when you think about what he offered against Atletico Madrid, that was it 44 pressures that he put in, the stat that's come out. We're going to need boys that have got high work rate tonight as well, you would think. So he's maybe not such a surprise inclusion after all. And it's another massive, massive game for him. If he wants to have a future at Celtic, and if we want him to have one, then he needs to step up and do it tonight to prove that he's the man worthy of taking Hatate's jersey while he's out. And so we can finally stop rotating that jersey, because that's beginning to grate on me a little bit, that no one's getting a run of games to cement the place in the team.
I think it's a very interesting inclusion this evening, Kevin, because what it does is it starts to beg the question of some of the guys who have not been picked as starters tonight. You mentioned Odin Thiago Holm. I like him. Some people might say, what do you see in him? I think there's been flashes that there's a player in there, but he is definitely the archetypal project player, someone who is going to be bedded into this side over a period of time, Kev. And I think that over 18 months to 2 seasons, you could maybe see a player develop into, the succession planning that we've not always had there, come into this midfield and take the jersey from one of the old timers, one of the old heads. I can see that. On a night like tonight, maybe it's a game too far, maybe it's a game too big for him. He's only 20 years of age. He's kind of breaking in on a domestic scene. I think that he showed against Aberdeen some of the positive parts of his game, and then he showed against Motherwell that he's inconsistent. But that comes with age, doesn't it? So I don't think there's any question marks around his future. The players I'm thinking about, however, are guys like David Turnbull, and also the man that Liam mentioned earlier. Although, he did say that he doesn't expect Brendan Rodgers to play Iwata. He thinks that this particular game would have been, set up for an Iwata performance. That strong, combative, defensive midfield player that would allow Callum McGregor a wee bit of freedom up top. And I know our very own Alan Morrison disagrees with that, because we've had that discussion between the two of us, where he doesn't think McGregor's got the legs anymore to play in that more advanced role. But Iwata isn't even on the bench tonight, and I think that does not bode well for him coming into the January transfer window. I know that you've got guys who haven't really featured, like Mikey Johnson now on the bench, and James Forrest, who's been in and out the side end of the squads. He wasn't in the Motherwell squad. He gets a start tonight. And also, Stephen Welsh coming into the squad just recently as well. However, I don't think Iwata's got a future at Celtic. I think that the inclusion of Bernardo does not bode well, particularly for Iwata. David Turnbull's on the bench tonight. He must cut a frustrated figure, Kevin. I mean, he makes an impact when he comes on. Is he a starter in Europe? I think in his own head he would like to be. Rodgers obviously doesn't trust him to be able to go out there tonight and play the game plan that he has in mind.
Yeah, I think if you dig in a little bit deeper to some of Rodgers' team selections and some of those bigger games, you start to see those things coming through a bit more. Like he said, Bernardo's a player he seems to trust in these games. He's played
a loney Kev. Somebody who may
exactly,
future,
Exactly, and it's a strange one, because he absolutely seems to trust him in the big games in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But at the weekend, he's turned to David Turnbull to come off the bench rather than Bernardo. So, maybe he's picking a team based on the game, based on the opposition that we've got. It does seem a little bit strange at times, though, that certain players are not getting a run. David Turnbull, I've got my doubts about him, as whether he is a first team starter for us. But the fact that he's come off the bench and scored at the weekend, scored the second penalty as well, which the thing that we spoke about after the game, and definitely after we were offline and whatnot, was the thing about the character of the players.
Yes.
And Turnbull showed massive character. So as much as I'll have a wee go at him at times for being a bit slow on the ball and being a bit ponderous, he stepped up to score that second penalty, which showed massive character. And maybe he's looking at a game like today thinking, I should be in that team. and the manager doesn't seem to trust him because, again, he's looked at a loanee, a player that no one knows if he's going to stay beyond the summer. He's about a £6-7 million clause that he'll have in his loan deal, the same as Jota had. Has Bernardo shown enough that you would spend that kind of money on him? If not,
nowhere near it. Nowhere near it, Kevin.
Nowhere near it. So there becomes a point where you have to cut that one out and go, let's develop the players that we've got, or bring someone else in that you trust a bit more. So, yeah, strange one. And Iwata, the boy, I mean, we've spoken about him since last season, about what he offers. Now, I'll go back to the 3-2 game against Rangers at Celtic Park last season, when we seemed to be losing the midfield for a wee bit, and he's come in alongside Callum McGregor. He showed it up. He's done it in almost every single game he's come in. He looked composed and assured. He offers us that physical presence in there.
Yeah, he does.
Personally, I don't see the reason why Rodgers doesn't play him. He obviously just doesn't fancy him. There's something
and he's
there.
our player. He's our player.
And he's our player. Exactly the point I was just about to make.
Most valuable player in Japanese football before he signed for us.
Exactly. So I just don't get it why he's not in there. I feel really sorry for him. And he probably will be away in January, or you wouldn't be surprised if he left in January, put it that way, because he's just not getting a look in at the moment. So, yeah.
Can I just say though, Kev, we've had quite a lot of contributors over the years on A Celtic State of Mind. Yesterday, Asim Rabani made his debut and he was phenomenal. Within 24 hours, he was on the BBC.
Yes,
I know, and he was brilliant on the 9 show last night as well. Phenomenal contribution. But I don't think we've ever had a contributor sitting on his couch stroking his cat like Dr. Claw at the Inspector Gadget's cartoon. So there's a first for everything, right? Let's hear your
professional as always me.
Let's hear your thoughts in the comment section. What do you make of that team? Is it kudos to Brendan Rodgers because it looks as though he's just going to go out and play toe-to-toe? Or is that naive? Is that where we go wrong in Europe? Let me know your thoughts. Jean-Paul II, see nothing but a pumping tonight. We cannot go to Italy and try and play them off the park. 3 central defenders are needed. We were talking about it. Listen, I know Brendan Rodgers is a far better tactician than I. I know that he knows his squad far, far better than anyone who's tuning in here. He sees them on a daily basis, Kev. He can see all the nuances of their game. And a big part of that will be their mentality and their attitude and their application at training, all this kind of thing. So, that side of it is one thing. Fan opinion is another. And that's something that we're allowed in this day and age. We're allowed to give our opinion. And, I guess at the end of the game, if we win the game, he's a genius. He's an absolute genius if he can execute this. If it goes the other way and it's another humbling or narrow defeat or whatever else, I could probably write the script right now for our post-match where we're saying, why didn't we go a wee bit more cautious in a game like this? Why are we always so naive, easy to play against, that type of thing? Okay, but I did say earlier on today when talking to Liam that we were extremely easy to play against for Motherwell. And if you're comparing that game to this game, it's levels. It is levels above tonight. Therefore, we need to be vastly improved from the weekend. We've not done anything spectacularly different. We've got the same shape, largely the same personnel. There's a few changes in there, but we really need to step up from the Motherwell game because we were predictable, we were easy to play against. Kyogo was anonymous other than the 22 minutes he was on the park with O. And we really need a sea change in the tempo as well this evening.
Yeah, basically we need to look at that performance against Motherwell and do the exact opposite tonight, because we were slow and we were turgid and we had no creativity, there was no spark. We need to be completely different tonight. We've sat here and done these pre-match shows for the Champions League games for the last season and a half or whatever, and before every single game, I think we've been pretty confident that tonight was going to be the night we'd get the result. After that performance at the weekend, you can't help but come on to tonight and be a little bit more downbeat. Or is it realistic? I don't know. But you look at that and you think, if we put in that level of performance as we did against Motherwell tonight, we'll get taken to the cleaners.
Mm-hmm.
Lazio, though, I mean, they lost at the weekend. And this is the thing I hate to see now, because it gives me a wee bit of hope. They lost at the weekend to Salernitana 2-1, and they're bottom of the league. So they're maybe not on such great form either. But yeah, I mean, we've just got to have a sea change in the performance. We've got to lift it. And the thing is, we've seen over the last season and a half, we've seen this season already, in the big European games, apart from the last one, we have been able to lift it a bit. And we have gone, as you say, toe to toe. We have given teams games. We've just not had the final bit of class to see us over the line. One of these days, it has to change. One of these days, we have to get that wee bit of luck that will see us through. Why not make it tonight? Come on. Gods of football, shine upon us. The last time we went to Rome to play against Lazio, I think we would probably have been having a similar type of conversation and not been overly confident. And we raised the game, we raised the roof, and we won that one 2-1. So maybe tonight's the night because we're not feeling overly confident.
Kev, there's one thing for sure. We have covered a lot, just the way it kind of works with your location, your job commitments and your family commitments and everything else. We've covered a lot of European games, and there probably hasn't been the vintage performance that we would have liked in that period. But it's true what you say. You're talking about the Lazio game last time round, away from home in the Europa League, where we win 2-1. And of course, James Forrest scored the equaliser. Immobile scored in a player I've always admired, Immobile for Lazio, but Forrest equalised that night, and then deep into injury time, Olivier Ntcham scores the winning goal. And it's a famous victory. We beat them home and away that season. Absolutely incredible, memorable victory for Celtic, and it was under Neil Lennon, of course. But before that game, when the lineups were announced, or before the Barcelona game that we win 2-1 back in 2012, when the lineups announced, I was talking about this earlier today, and they tell you that Miku's playing up top, and your central defensive partnership is Ambrose and Kelvin Wilson. You're probably not approaching that game thinking this is the night we're going to get a result. So the team last time round that we played,
17-year-old. You've got a 17-year-old centre forward called Tony Watt on the bench. What chance have you got?
I know, there's the great footage, obviously, of him in the tunnel, and the Barcelona players are looking at him as if he's a mascot or something like that, and obviously he comes on and scores the second goal. But the way Celtic lined up that night against Lazio in the famous away tie where we win 2-1, in the yellow and green top that probably would have been pretty nondescript had it not been for that game. That's what it's remembered for. You know how jerseys then instantly become liked or loathed depending on which games or victories that we've worn them in. Fraser Forster was in goals with Jamesy Forrest and Johnny Hayes playing right and left down the flanks. Ilhamid, Julian and Ayer made up a back three with Christie, Brown and McGregor as your trio, Edouard and El Yunusi up top. So, I mean, to be honest with you, if that was the team that was read out and you and I were doing the pre-match, I'd have probably looked at that team with some confidence. I mean, going back now, there's not many, weak links in that side. I was never a massive fan of John Hayes, for example. But I think most of the players in that team I was pretty confident with. If you're looking at tonight's lineup, are there any areas that you're thinking, right, not quite sure about that? I know that those in the comment section are mentioning Bernardo, but obviously Jamesy Forrest, for other reasons, is someone else that I think wouldn't be a particularly, for me, popular choice playing on the left flank in place of Louis Palma.
Probably won't, but who else is there? It's either him or Mikey Johnson, and I'd rather go with James Forrest every day of the week at the moment. I don't understand all the hate that Forrest gets. I know he's getting on a bit, but he's still only he's 31, 32, something like that. So he's not quite over the hill yet. He's a really experienced player, and we need experience in a game like today. And he can still do it. He's maybe not got the pace anymore, but I think he's still got something about him in his game. And this could just be that big game that we need that experience to see us through. I'm actually pretty happy that he's there over Mikey Johnson. And when it comes to at the end, Johnson's maybe got the legs, so maybe you get him on for the last 20, 30 minutes, and that's where he can actually influence something. So I've got no real worries about Forrest up front or out wide. I think the obvious point that you've got any worries is left back. It's Taylor. He seems to be the weak link in the defence, and teams target him because of that. There's no hiding it that's where opposition teams tend to play the diagonal balls because they know that he can be the weak link. So that's probably the one place. It's nothing new though. We know that's where it is. We
Is
just need to
Forrest
have him
ahead
on
of him, Kev?
his game.
Is Forrest playing in front of him? He will be.
Well, he
Because I
probably
mean, I
will
know
be,
that he's more effective on the
because I
right,
think,
but
Yang's more effective on the right as well, and I think
yeah,
we need to use him as the right winger. Forrest will come back. He'll try and help him as much as he can. He'll do that. Johnny Hayes thing.
yeah.
Johnny Hayes was never the most effective player going forward when he was out there, but he always did put in a shift defensively. So maybe there's that thinking as well. Mikey Johnson wouldn't give you a defensive shift, and
This is
Forrest
my
will.
point. This is my point. I remember,
So,
you remember when Johnson was thrown in for his debut, and the bigger surprise was Jamesy Forrest was playing in front of him, and I think that the reason for that is he's got that work ethic to track back and put in the defensive shift. It's something. It was probably the only element of Jota's game that I thought was weak, was the defensive side of it. I think in season 2 there was more of a dig in Jota's game, but it certainly wasn't a natural thing, was it, to cover back? You knew that you certainly weren't going to get too much in the way of defensive support. Someone might throw some stats. I mean, I knew that El Yunusi, for example, was excellent in tracking back. It's something that's maybe gone under the radar, but he was a player that you could trust would give your fullback a bit of cover. You could confidently allow your fullback to overlap, knowing that the left winger would then drop back and cover you. But it's probably another consideration, because Greg Taylor has come in for quite a bit of stick this season, and I know we're quick to do that, particularly when you consider how well he's played over the last couple of years under Ange Postecoglou. You had that first section of the season where Rodgers was utilising the fullback slightly differently, Kev, but we've now converted them back to what was for me the most effective position under Ange Postecoglou, in that they were more inverted. And I think it assists the midfield area as well. McGregor didn't seem to play as well when we didn't have the inverted fullbacks earlier in the season. He's now got a wee bit more support. But he is targeted. He's targeted for club and for country. And I think that they see him as a weak link. Opposition teams, they look at his stature, his physical or lack of physical presence, and they do target him. So I think it's important that you've got Forrest out there as well. By the way, Forrest is no great big defender, but I do think that his work rate does assist the fullback that's behind him, Kev. So that's a very, very important point.
And I think Forrest's the kind of guy that will put his line on the body, his body on the line, even if he has to. We've seen the goal that we lost against Motherwell at the weekend. That's because Taylor was never going to challenge for that. So your man gets a free header at it. If it's somebody even like Forrest that's there, he's at least going to make it awkward for the Motherwell player to get in the end of it. And that's what he'll do again tonight. It's about kind of putting his body in the way. Maybe that's where Bernardo's there. Maybe he'll play the left centre midfield as well. So he'll provide that other wee bit of defensive support.
Good shout.
And that's why he's in the team. Yeah. So, yeah, opposition will identify Taylor as a weak link, but I think maybe Rodgers has as well, and he's trying to defend that weakest area. And if he can keep Yang in the right, I think he's the outball that we need. He's got that pace, he's direct. And if he can find Kyogo with a pass, you put your money in Kyogo to score almost every time.
Especially tonight, especially after I'm getting a bit of stick recently, Kyogo. I think, you know what, it's not just about buying basketball players, right? Because we come up against teams like that in Scotland and they're not particularly good footballers. Livingston do it and Motherwell do it. What it's about, I think, though, is looking at the fact that once you step into this arena, Kevin, and again, it was Alan Morrison who made the point, he was very concerned about the physical aspect of our midfield. When you step into this arena, you can be overpowered. Now, Greg Taylor obviously has been in the Champions League this season and previously. And I go back to us signing either a challenger stroke replacement in Alexander O'Bernaby, and I question it every single time, because you look at his lack of stature, his lack of physicality. He's 5'5", Bernaby's tiny, right? And that's why I think that was a strange one. And I hope that we are willing to go top heavy until we can move Bernaby out the building, because I would hate to go through another transfer window without strengthening that area of the park. Now, Chancer, Greg Taylor, go out and have the game of your life and ram that down my throat. Hopefully that's what happens, right? And at the end of the game, I can put my hands up and say, Taylor, you're an absolute world beater. Chancer, can someone tell me what Rodgers sees in Bernardo because I just can't see it. I think what Kev just said there in relation to his defensive qualities, the thing that bothers me, and this is maybe a legacy thing, is that he is getting the nod over players that are already Celtic players with contracts. And I think what that says, Kev, is that some of the guys we've got at the club already don't have the attributes that Rodgers is looking for. If we can bring in someone who's an under 21, a Benfica reserve, and he's actually getting the nod over David Turnbull and Iwata, really, because Holmes just in the building. But if you're David Turnbull and Iwata, you're particularly Iwata, you're looking at that situation thinking, where's my future? Where does it lie? Turnbull's going to be very frustrated because he has made an impact when he's played this season, Kev. But yeah, Chancellor, I think it is mainly down to the defensive qualities of Bernardo. Someone will have a spreadsheet with all the criteria and he'll be scoring high on all the metrics when it comes to defensive play, Kev. That's what I think this comes down to.
Yeah, I think so. I think that is why he's in tonight. And the more I think about it, probably the more it makes sense that he is there. It would be a toss-up between him and Home. But I reckon he's more defensive-minded, Bernardo, and I think he's played more in the left out of the three. So that is probably why he's there. But the worrying thing or the concerning thing with that is there's nothing wrong with bringing in a loan player if you're going to play him every week, like we did with Carter Vickers, like we did with Jota.
Yeah.
Right? They were loans to buy, and they played every week, and they were worthy of the loan. It is a concern, though, when you bring in a loan player who is a Portuguese under-21 international, so should have a lot of ability, but he can't make himself a first-team regular. So he's then on the bench, and you are wondering if he's on the bench some weeks, not on the bench the other. He's been overlooked at times when he is on the bench because at the weekend Turnbull's the man he goes to rather than him.
Yeah.
So you do begin to question, like, at a point, okay, we can't terminate his loan deal right now. Maybe we could in January. Why continue to pick him over somebody that's already there? Why develop someone for another club that you've got no intention of keeping when you've got a good player already in your system? Then maybe Rodgers does see there's been a big future in him, but he needs to start playing him more. And then he needs to start proving when he's in that he's worth it.
So tonight, what we're looking for is player of the match performances from Bernardo and Greg Taylor to prove us wrong, Kev. They're the two guys that we seem to have singled out tonight. IHD creating. Always great to see you in the comments. So you've been supportive of the ACSOM live stream for a good going on 4 years now. So it's great to see you. That lineup is a joke and not for the first time. We are never going to do anything of note with the current board in place. We wouldn't blame Rodgers if he walked in the summer. I think Rodgers, as well as being hamstrung by the fact that he's come into a club who were probably not expecting Ange to leave. Therefore, there was things in place, Kev, in terms of recruitment that were already in place. And as much as Rodgers will tell you that I get final say on this and that, we know how modern football works with recruitment. And I think also, two batches of terrible injuries. The first batch was the central defensive area, and now we're suffering a situation with the wingers. So all season, when have we actually played what would be Brendan Rodgers' strongest starting 11? Because as soon as Hatate come back from injury and he started showing a bit of form, he was injured again. Arguably Liam Scales isn't the first pick, although he is on form. We signed a £4.5 million defender who's not barely played. So the strongest 11 has very rarely been at Brendan's disposal. And I think come January, maybe post-January, if we still have that kind of issue with personnel, it will become frustrating for us, but it'll also become frustrating for the gaffer.
Yeah, it will do. I think you've got to read between the lines a little bit about some of the players that came in the summer, and Rodgers saying that he's got final say in everyone. I think there must have been a few deals that were quite a wee bit down the line. And we know there were, actually, because Tilio was being looked at for 2 years. Odenholm was lined up. I think Kwon would have been lined up. Yang. There's a few of those guys that have been brought in for Ange. So January is probably Rodgers' first kind of solo run at the transfer market for us. So we'll see who he brings in. And I think maybe Jerry mentioned this the other day, but more importantly, who goes. That'll be quite telling as well as he shapes his squad into his way of playing. But yeah, I mean, you're right. A guy like Brendan Rodgers as well, when he comes in, I'm not going to say with his ego, but with his stature in the game behind him, if he's not getting his way in the transfer market, he will get frustrated because there's only so much he can do when he's going to operate with one arm tied behind his back. We know he can develop players, but if he's not getting the chance to bring in his type of player, then it doesn't matter. He'll never be able to take us to where he wants to take us. So I think January, as we said at the weekend as well, we've been saying for the last wee while, January is going to be a massive period for us, not just for the rest of this season and how it goes, but how we build towards next season as well.
You're right, and he does become frustrated. He became frustrated first time round, and he became frustrated at Leicester. Some of the interviews that he was given in the final season, Kev, and I'm not saying he was getting his excuses in early, but he wasn't happy with the players coming in. He wasn't happy with recruitment. So, yes, let's focus on tonight, and let's hope that Bernardo sets up Taylor for the winning goal, because Kevin and I have been talking about and focusing on those two players in particular, and Jamesy Forrest. Let's go to kick-off. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved in the pre-match Champions League chat. Come back at half-time, where you'll be joined by myself and Kevin again. Go and enjoy the first half, and hopefully when we do come back, we can talk about a positive first 45. Thank you to Kevin McCloskey for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Nice one. Cheers, Paul.